Okavango Delta, early afternoon. The Lioness dropped near the slope of a dry riverbed, just beyond a patch of brittle reeds. She did not fall dramatically. There was no thrash, no sound. Her legs gave way all at once, and then she lay still, breathing fast, the skin around her ribs hollowing in and out with each shallow pull of air. She had made it to the open. That alone meant something. But she was alone. No other tracks circled hers. No calls answered from the bush. She wasn't hunting. She wasn't stalking. She was running from something. And now she is done. Daniel saw her first through a scope from the east ridge. He had come to track migrating buffalo along the dry paths between salt licks, but what caught his eye wasn't movement. It was the lack of it. A young female lion in the open, exposed to heat and scavengers, unmoving. That wasn't normal. He watched for a long time before taking a step. When he reached the edge of the rise, he paused. She hadn't moved. From this distance, he could see the matting of dried blood on her side, tucked high into the shoulder where it met her neck. It wasn't gushing. That was worse. If she was still bleeding, there was circulation. If not, the wound was deep, the system failing. Her belly did not show signs of bloat. She hadn't eaten, at least not recently. He signaled once to the field radio crew but didn't raise his voice. Any rush now would cost them the only calm she had left. Her eyes opened once as he approached, slow and wide around her. Not in panic, in warning. But she didn't bare her teeth. She simply looked. A dry gust lifted a few thorns along the ridge behind them, but she didn't react. She was still listening, still registering. That meant there was time. Not much, but some. Daniel crouched 40 meters away. No barriers, no rifle, just stillness. If she decided to stand, to lunge, he would not outrun her. If she fled, she would collapse again. The wrong movement now could kill her. He sat back on his heels and waited. After 2 minutes, she blinked. Her breathing was uneven. Every fourth inhale caught for a second too long. Her mouth was dry. She hadn't licked her lips once. The wound wasn't her only problem. Starvation or infection had started to creep in. He spotted ticks clustered near the tail ridge and along the ears. She had been alone for at least a week. Probably more. Behind them, the sun held steady and unkind. Heat shimmered across the dry riverbed. A single vulture circled, low but distant. Not close enough to mean death, but watching. She wasn't being hunted by other lions. There were no territorial marks nearby. This wasn't a clash over pride hierarchy. She had been forced out or abandoned. When she shifted, it wasn't to rise. Her front paw dragged forward an inch, then another. She was crawling, not away, not to strike, but toward him. Her head stayed low, her eyes fixed. Her tail didn't twitch. 4 feet, then 3, then 2, then still. Her body dropped again, this time lower, almost flat. He whispered, only once. "It's all right." She didn't move, but her ears didn't pin. They stayed up, attuned, focused. The radio hissed softly behind his back. They had visual confirmation now from the northern slope. Help would arrive in 10 minutes, maybe 15. If she ran now, she would die. If she held, they might have a chance. The air felt heavier. Daniel didn't move again. Not until her eyes closed, not in sleep, but in stillness, as if her body had reached its edge. That edge had to hold just a little longer. The lioness stirred again. Her front paw scraped forward across the dust, carving a small trench where the dry soil broke beneath her claws. It was not strength that moved her. It was something else. She didn't rise. She didn't growl. She only pulled herself forward, one slow drag at a time, her belly brushing the ground. Her back legs limp behind her. Each shift of her body sent a tremble through the air, the kind felt more than heard. But Daniel didn't move. He stayed crouched, knees low, hands on the earth. The radio, clipped to his side, crackled once, but he didn't reach for it. If he did, she might stop. If she stopped now, she might not start again. He kept his breath shallow and steady, every motion deliberate. The lioness inched closer. 6 meters, then 5. Her eyes remained locked on his face. They didn't flash with anger or fear. They simply asked a question neither of them had words for. Her flank rose and fell like a failing bellows. Dried blood cracked near the wound. Her tail lay motionless. The quiver in her legs had worsened. But still, she moved. 2 more pulls forward. Then stillness again. She blinked slowly. He blinked back. Somewhere behind them, an engine turned over. A soft echo of movement from the incoming medical team. But the lioness didn't lift her head. She wasn't listening anymore. Her attention had narrowed to what stood directly in front of her. A man who had not run, not flinched, not challenged her, and not ignore her either. That, in the wild, was rare. Daniel shifted only once, letting his knees settle into the ground fully, lowering his frame. A sign of peace. No threat. Still, she didn't recoil. No warning calls left her mouth. No hackles rose. Just one front paw inching forward again, barely clearing the earth before she dragged it back under her chest. 4 meters. That was all. She was 4 meters from a human being and not reacting with fear. And yet, this wasn't tameness. This was exhaustion so deep it stripped her of instinct. Or perhaps it was a choice. A decision born from the clarity that sometimes comes when the body can no longer run. She could have turned. But she didn't. He watched her ribcage twitch beneath her hide. The movements had grown erratic. She was nearing collapse again. If she lay down now and closed her eyes, she might not open them. The wound above her shoulder had begun to darken. The flies had found it. Infection was likely. But she didn't stop. Another crawl, then a pause, then one more, until her front paw stretched halfway across the last patch of shade between them. Her nose brushed the edge of his boot print in the sand. She could go no further. Daniel opened his mouth, but said nothing. There was nothing more to offer than what had already been given. Presence. A gust passed through the low shrubs behind them. She blinked once, then let her body ease into the ground again. Not fully collapsed. Not unconscious. Just finished. Her breathing shallowed further, the effort now more visible than audible. He didn't move, didn't reach. The team was close now, maybe 2 minutes out, but this moment, this stillness, held its own weight. A lioness had run toward a man and chosen to rest within his reach, not because she knew him, but because perhaps she sensed something wasn't chasing her anymore. If they tried to sedate her now, her heart could fail. If they waited too long, her body might shut down. Every second was narrowing. But she had made it this far. That had to mean something. The vet crouched behind the rise, syringe already loaded. The dosage was precise, just enough to quiet her muscles, not stop her heart. But she was too close to him now. 4 meters, maybe less, and not lying flat. Her body, though weak, was still angled forward, her front legs beneath her. If she startled, she could lunge, not in defense, in confusion. And that would end it. Daniel didn't look back. His hands rested on his thighs, fingers slightly curled. He hadn't spoken since the last whisper. The lioness hadn't moved since the final drag of her paw. Her eyes were open but dim, as if the world in front of her was being held at a distance. Still, she watched him. The vet gave a low signal. One sharp nod. Another ranger flanked left, holding the secondary sedative rifle. It was backup, not Plan A. The first plan was always stillness. "She's not attacking," the vet said under his breath, barely audible through the brush. "But if we rush her now, we'll lose her." They had seen this before. A lion too far gone for instinct to fully guide her. The brain is still alert. The body is failing, and in the gap between both, a razor-thin chance to intervene, but not by force, not by speed, only by timing and presence. A tranquilizer dart could spook her. Even the whisper of the compressed air releasing might send her forward, toward the man, the one she had chosen not to fear. The vet crept 5 paces closer, knees low. One ranger unrolled a portable blind to shield movement from her view, but she blinked slowly, not in panic, in fatigue. Her sides lifted once, then again. Slower. She wasn't fighting them. She was fading. Daniel gave a single signal. His right hand opened fully, palm up, fingers splayed against the ground. A gesture not taught, just understood. He stayed still, but let his weight shift forward slightly. His breath remained steady. The vet took one more step, then paused. "Now," he whispered. The air hissed quietly. The dart struck her rear flank, not deep, just through the skin. She twitched, not a full startle. But her ears flattened for one moment, then returned. She didn't run. For the next 30 seconds, nothing happened. The sedative was light, intended to lower her into stillness without distress, but her eyes began to drift, not fully shut, just heavier. Her chin lowered an inch, her ribs kept moving. Not fast, not slow, just enough. "If she collapses forward, brace her airway," the vet murmured. Daniel nodded once, but didn't move. Not yet. The team stayed behind the blind. They had done what they could. Now, every second would either deepen her breath or slow it beyond recovery. What was at risk remained plain. If she woke in confusion, she might bolt and reopen the wound. If she panicked, she might strike out. If the sedative overran her system, her lungs might give way. There were no guarantees now, only reactions. She shifted again, just a slight turn of the head, not toward the ridge, not toward the team, but toward Daniel. Her eyes caught him once more, and then closed gently as her body exhaled into the earth. She didn't collapse. She settled, as if finally she had found a place quiet enough to let go. They would move in soon, to treat, to clean, to hydrate, but none of that would work if she didn't hold on through the next hour. Daniel stayed kneeling. Stillness wasn't safe, but today it gave them something close. The lioness lay fully now, her breath shallow but regular, her body still except for the twitch of one rear paw. The sedative had worked, not too deep, not too slow, just enough to lower her safely. The silence around her was total. Even the insects seemed to have stilled, as if the dry air had suspended its rhythm to watch what came next. Daniel remained where he was, no more than 3 meters from her head. He hadn't moved since the injection. A ranger stepped forward first with a hydration kit, eyes fixed on her ribs, counting the rise and fall. Then the vet emerged from behind the blind, kneeling low, scanning the lioness from tail to crown without touching her. Her eyes remained closed, but her ears flicked once as the wind shifted behind her. "Still aware," the vet whispered. "She's holding on." He placed 2 fingers gently on her lower leg and waited. The pulse was faint, but present. Then he reached for the wound near her front shoulder. The fur there was stained black around the edges, not just from blood, but from fluid. The smell hit immediately. Sharp, metallic, wrong. The punctures were deep, 3 at least, clean through the muscle. Not a snare, not a thorn. These were teeth, large, spaced. Another lion, likely a male, likely recent. The edges were raw, not crusted. It hadn't happened days ago. This was fresh, possibly hours. "She didn't walk here," the vet said. "She ran, then fell." He leaned back and nodded to Daniel. The man finally rose, slow and careful, brushing dust from his knees. He stepped once toward the lioness, then stopped. Eyes still fixed on her face. Her breathing was shallower now. Not worse, but changing. Sedation would reach its peak soon. They had minutes. "She ran to us," he said softly. "Not away." The vet glanced at him, then turned back to the wound. "We'll need to flush it now. If it's poison-laced, we don't wait." Some fights among lions were brutal but rare. This didn't look like dominance. This looked like punishment, or removal. And the fact that the lioness hadn't struck back, no counter wounds on her attacker, no blood on her claws, suggested she hadn't fought. She'd fled. They poured the first liter of saline directly over the gash. It ran dark, tinged with yellow. The vet's face tightened. Venom compound, possibly from recent kills, might have transferred through the bite. That meant infection. That meant time mattered more now than before. If the blood absorbed it fully, organ failure would start within hours. They inserted a catheter into the rear vein, slow, steady. The lioness didn't flinch. Her body was limp but warm. Hydration flowed. Her chest kept rising. What was at risk could not have been clearer. If they didn't stabilize her circulation, the venom would reach her heart. If they gave too much fluid, her lungs might flood. Every action had weight. Every pause could cost recovery. But she was still alive, still breathing, and her eyes, even closed, had left something behind. Daniel crouched near her head again. One hand rested in the dirt. He didn't touch her, just remained. The vet signaled for antibiotics, then stepped back to prepare the second flush. The lioness didn't stir, but her body had stopped trembling. That, for now, was the only sign they needed. They moved her at first light. No cage, no steel transport. Just a stretcher rigged from tarp and poles, 6 hands carrying her weight slowly across the flat edge of the field. She didn't wake during the shift. The sedation had faded enough to stabilize her, but not enough for awareness. That was safer. If she rose too soon, panic could set in. If she moved too fast, the stitches would tear. The team set the shelter just beyond the tree line. A soft canvas canopy, open on 3 sides, with shade in the morning and quiet in the evening. Not a pen, not a trap, just a boundary. They cleared space for her body and laid her on a bed of dry reeds. 1 pulse check. 1 final hydration drip. Then they stepped back. She opened her eyes just before noon. Not all the way, just enough to scan the shapes around her. Daniel was sitting outside the edge of the tarp, legs crossed, back to a support beam. He didn't move. She blinked once, then closed her eyes again. That night the air cooled. The vet left the field by dusk, but Daniel stayed. A sleeping mat, a kettle, a solar lantern dimmed to a warm pulse, nothing more. No walls, no barrier between him and her. She didn't shift much. Only once did her front paw stretch forward, claws barely visible. It wasn't a threat. It was a rest. By morning, she had licked the wound. Just once. The bandage remained intact. That was a good sign. They offered food by midday, a softened mix of protein paste and fluid, placed 3 feet from her nose. At first, she didn't respond. Then, slowly, her head lifted. She sniffed. She turned her eyes toward Daniel first. He didn't react, just watched. She took 1 bite, then stopped. Later, she finished half of it. That night, Daniel stayed again. She didn't sleep much, but she didn't watch the trees either. She watched him. Each movement he made was slow. He boiled water for tea, fixed his bedroll, repositioned a fold in the tarp, but always with quiet hands. The wind picked up once. She lifted her head. He lowered the lantern's glow. She blinked slowly and lowered her head back down. The second day, her breathing evened. She stood once, only to reposition herself. The leg held. The stitches held. She didn't collapse. That was enough. What remained at risk was still plain. If infection returned, it would move fast. If the wound reopened, she'd lose blood too quickly to recover. If she panicked during the next examination, the sedative might not work again. Every hour she stayed calm bought her time. Every meal she touched bought her strength. She didn't roar, didn't cry. She simply watched. And when Daniel moved in the mornings, folding his blanket, brushing off the dust, she lifted her head to follow, not with urgency, just with presence. By the fourth night, she had eaten twice. The wound was cleaner. Her eyes stayed open longer. She drank from a shallow bowl placed within reach. No refusal, no aggression. The shelter held its quiet. Daniel adjusted nothing. He kept his distance, slept near, never close, let the silence be the language between them, and she answered with her breath. The sixth night settled in quietly, as most had. No wind, no sudden rustling in the grass, just the soft, steady hum of heat lifting off the ground and the slow rhythm of breath from under the canvas. The Lioness hadn't moved much that day. She'd eaten a full portion of protein paste and lapped water in 3 short bursts. Her wound was no longer weeping. She rested with her legs tucked close, not sprawled. That small change mattered. It meant strength was returning. Daniel had grown used to the stillness. He'd begun to hear the subtler sounds, the night birds changing pitch before moonrise, the chirp of insects thinned by wind, the quiet shuffle of reed stalks bending under their own weight. But just after dusk, a different sound reached the edge of camp. Low, throaty, and unmistakable. A growl. Not nearby, not aggressive, but unmistakably a lion. It came from the ridge to the west, where the ground lifted slightly and gave line of sight to the plains beyond. The growl sounded once, then paused. Then again, drawn out, longer, not repeated for territory. It was a search call, deep, steady, not young. Daniel sat upright. The Lioness lifted her head at the same moment. Not fast, not alarmed, but be aware. Her ears turned toward the sound. She didn't rise. Her body didn't tense. She listened. Then she closed her eyes again. The growl came twice more, farther off now, trailing behind the scrub line. No answer followed. That night, she didn't sleep deeply. Her body stayed mostly still, but her ears moved constantly. Left, right, pausing, listening again. Daniel stayed awake longer than usual, lantern dimmed, tea untouched. He didn't speak, didn't radio, just sat and watched the edges of the dark. By dawn, it was clear the sound hadn't been imagined. The prints were real, heavy, deep, male. They curved around the back of the camp and stopped 15 meters from the edge of the tarp. Then they turned and vanished into the brush. No signs of stalking, no scrape marks. No paw drag. He hadn't come to hunt. He'd come to see. The Lioness rose slowly that morning, first to her chest, then, with a long pause, to her feet. She didn't pace, she didn't call. She walked 3 slow steps to where the tarp edge met dirt, then sat, facing the ridge, quiet, still. Daniel marked the tracks before the wind took them. 4 clear pads, wide and splayed. The gait had been calm. That meant recognition, familiarity maybe. It also meant the risk had changed. If the male returned again and approached closer, the Lioness might respond. She might try to follow. If she moved too far, too soon, the wound could tear. If they blocked her path, she might resist. The line between recovery and danger had narrowed. She lay back down after half an hour. Her eyes are softer, her breath even. Whatever the night had stirred in her, it hadn't frightened her. It had woken something else. The vet arrived midday, checked the stitches, nodded once, and said only, "She's healing." But Daniel kept looking at the ridge, not in fear, in anticipation. The prince said enough. He had come, but he hadn't crossed. Not yet. On the 9th morning, the Lioness stood without hesitation. No trembling. No pause between limbs. She pushed up from her haunches in one fluid motion and remained upright. Her body looked lean still, but no longer weak. The wound had closed into a long, dark line stitched neatly across her shoulder. She no longer licked at it. The infection was gone. What remained now was a choice. Daniel noticed the shift before she even moved. Her ears had been still during the night. No more listening for footsteps. No more flinches at the wind. She had slept fully with her head down and breathing deep. When he stirred, she watched him calmly. She didn't rise until he stood. The canvas shelter had been left open on one side each day, but the path out had always remained marked by a soft barrier. A strip of raised tape. A symbolic line she had never crossed. That morning, Daniel pulled the canvas gate fully to the side. No sound, no speech, just a clear opening. Then he stepped away, hands behind him, and sat where he always did. Close, but not in the way. She watched for several minutes, unmoving. Then she lowered her head, sniffed the air, and took a single step. One more. Her paws reached the tape. She stopped. I looked back at Daniel, then looked beyond the open brush, where grass lifted gently in the heat. If she ran now, they wouldn't stop her. But if she ran too far, her muscles might not hold. The wound, though sealed, could still break under pressure. If she stayed too long, the male might return again. If she left too soon, she might not be strong enough to defend herself. These were facts Daniel had spoken quietly to the vet 2 days before. But facts didn't choose. She did. The lioness stepped over the line, not fast, not fearful, just forward. Her body held straight. Her tail moved gently with her walk, not stiff. She paused 3 meters from the shelter and turned back. Her eyes settled on Daniel. And then, without drama or sound, she walked toward the side of the canvas wall, the place where his sleeping mat had rested each night. There, she lowered her head slightly and leaned forward, pressing the side of her face softly into the tarp. Not forcefully. Not long. Just once. Then she turned again, stepped into the grass, and walked on. Daniel didn't follow. He stood slowly, knees aching from long nights on the ground, and watched her shape blur against the distant trees. The vet emerged from the tree line minutes later, breath held. "Did she bolt?" he asked. Daniel shook his head. She walked. By noon, they'd lost sight of her completely. But that wasn't a failure. It was released. What remained at risk was no longer theirs to hold. Out there, the terrain would test her. The heat. The wounds left inside her that no medicine could touch. But she had stepped out under her own weight. Not carried, not chased, not caged. And before she did, she had looked back. That was enough. They followed her path at dawn, while the ground still held the impressions of night. The wind hadn't yet scattered the dust, and the early light cast shadows into each print she left behind. Clean, deep, steady. No stagger, no scuff marks. The stride was even, measured. Not that of an animal fleeing, but one returning to what it knew. The vet and a tracker named Imani walked ahead, scanning for signs. Daniel remained behind them by a few paces, silent. He hadn't spoken much since she left. There was nothing to explain. The lioness had chosen her moment. She had chosen the direction. That was all. 300 meters from the shelter, the first set of prints angled east, deeper into the bush. Then another set appeared beside them. Larger, older, made during the night. A male. The same one who had circled the camp days before. His stride matched hers now. 2 paths moving together, not exactly parallel, but close enough to speak of something more than coincidence. "Same male," Imani said quietly. His gaze relaxed. He wasn't hunting. Daniel nodded. The vet crouched to measure the depth of a print. "She caught up," he said. "Or waited." The ground told the rest. For nearly a kilometer the prints stayed in tandem. No signs of struggle, no broken foliage. Just two sets moving in the same direction. A pattern that suggested peace, or at least understanding. He hadn't forced her. She hadn't avoided him. The trail curved past an old termite mound, then dipped near a dry stream bed. There, before the bush thickened into low thorns and scattered trees, something unusual caught their attention. It wasn't a print, it wasn't a mark on the earth. It was fabric, half buried in sand and tangled in grass. A torn piece of green tarp lay folded against the ground, stained slightly at the edge, frayed from wear. It was from the shelter, no doubt. The canvas flap had been snagged once the night before. They'd noticed it tearing when rolling the side open. They hadn't thought much of it. But now it was here, far beyond where wind could have carried it. Daniel stepped forward and picked it up. It had been dropped, not blown. The way it lay, pressed into the dirt at a deliberate angle, said so. Not from an accident, from intent, perhaps carried in the mouth, perhaps nudged and released. It didn't matter how, only that it was left. "She carried it?" the vet asked. Daniel didn't answer. He knelt, pressed the fabric back down, and let his fingers rest there for a moment. Some animals leave no sign when they go. Others leave everything. But what this lioness had left behind was neither grief nor marking. It was a memory, a piece of the place where she had not been chased, where no cage had closed, where the only thing that met her pain was stillness. The prints moved on, deeper now, into the wild where tracking would soon become guesswork. They didn't follow past the acacias. The sun was higher now, and the trail would fade. She had returned to her world, stronger, wounded, but walking. Somewhere beyond the trees, two lions moved together. Or didn't. That, too, was her choice. The torn tarp lay half in shadow as the wind finally stirred. It didn't lift. It stayed.